Welcome to another episode of the Every Man Can Mental Strength Podcast. Hopefully, we can help find what works for you. Hello, welcome to another episode of the Every Man Can Podcast with me, Matt, and Richie. Today, how are you, Rich?
I'm alright, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Busy old week.
Yeah.
But yeah, all good. Today we are back at Teesside Park on behalf of British Land. We are joined by Micky Nicholas MBE, a previous guest in our podcast. We're going to be talking today about paternity leave for men and how important that is. So firstly, thank you for Teesside Park for hosting us again. British Land, a pleasure to work alongside them as well. I'll introduce Micky Nicholas MBE.
Michael.
It's really funny when I hear
Michael.
Yeah.
Oh, Mickey.
Sounds like my dad's
It's
talking.
like you're in trouble, right?
Yeah,
You're in trouble.
always in
You
trouble.
might be.
Michael's always the trouble name, isn't it?
ED&I lead for Northumbrian Water, ex-firefighter with the London Fire Brigade, where you did a lot of work for the union, which gained you your MBE and, should we say fame or?
Recognition.
Definitely not fame, that.
Which got you your recognition. How are you?
Yeah, good. Been a long winter so far, but yeah, good. Really good.
So Richie, how are you before we start? We'll do our check-in.
I'm really good. Yeah, we've got, look, despite lots of difficulties going on personally, with the family and so on, like health-wise, we're all supporting each other in good shape. Very lucky and very grateful to have those people, my family around me. So it's all good, man. All good.
Good.
How about you?
Yeah, about the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, just family stuff, but health-wise, yeah, all good. Kids are good. Yeah.
It's like a really good definition of like resilience at the moment. It's like, yeah, you can have tough times, but you know, with all those different things going on that kick back against it and support it, you do good.
100%, which actually I think that leads us quite nicely onto the topic of paternity.
Well, we're all dads.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm one and counting for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't believe you're counting.
I know, yeah, I'm not counting anymore, mate. I got to one, I was like, that's enough.
Whoa.
I know. No, he's great.
So I'm hoping today, Micky, I'm hoping you can bring obviously your vast experience into this. I'm going to bring my own experiences of what I experienced from the police side of stuff with an incident that happened to me. I'm sure, Rich, you've got some stuff. So the definition of paternity is the state of being a father or the relationship between a father and a child. Love that. I did some research and this is a generic paternity leave. So employees can take 1 or 2 weeks of paternity leave within 52 weeks of the child's birth. The leave must be used to support the child and their mother, which is understandable. You must notify your employer of the date of the birth as soon as possible. Employees may be entitled to statutory paternity pay for up to 2 weeks. Some employers offer more than statutory pay, and this is called enhanced or contractual pay. So I suppose the topic and the discussion today is, what are your thoughts on how we support men with paternity? Does it support the mother? I suppose there's some fellas out there who might say 2 weeks is enough for me, get me back to work.
Yeah, maybe. And there might be some guys who just went to Vegas for a couple of weeks.
Well, it says to support the child and their mother.
And by not being there.
I wish I would have thought about it. My wife would have probably thought I was more supportive by not being there.
Yeah.
So this is the thing, and I think it's a real interesting topic to talk about with three fathers here. So
Can I just, I'm going to chime in before you go any further. It's like the reasons why fathers are important in this role as well. So I did a quick dig on the evidence on this as well. So emotional development, dads play a significant role in the emotional development of babies. Babies observe and emulate the behaviours and mannerisms during the first year. And according to research, babies who have had active paternal participation develop faster and are more socially adept. So they see all the development touch points that they see over a baby's development actually tends to be accelerated and more developed when there's healthy paternal involvement as well. And also a father's presence and involvement during the first year of a baby's life helps promote trust and alleviate anxieties of abandonment. So that's particularly important for the baby's sense of security and emotional stability. So you've got the development milestones, you've got that trust and security, which is really important. You've got those social skills. And then, of course, you've got bonding and affection. So that's about being sensitive, warm, developing that empathy, reflecting that back, those qualities build a strong bond between the father and the baby, and then of course supporting the mother as well. So it's like it helps to alleviate the pressures and the health of the mum.
How many dads know that though?
Well, that's it. And it's like,
yeah, I also think that actually it's a two-way thing, because I've been a young dad and a far too old dad, and certainly when my eldest, who's 36 now, came along, actually my the development was also for me.
Yeah.
As a young dad, and in society now, when you look at the research, people are becoming parents a lot younger than, say, they were 40, 50 years ago. So sometimes the difficulty is that people are not emotionally mature enough, especially us blokes. Yeah. So sometimes that benefit, and some of the benefits you talked about, is actually for us as well. I know it certainly benefited a very immature me all those years ago, for sure.
I remember. Do you remember that moment when your first child was born?
Oh, yeah.
You remember it?
Absolutely.
The tears, the overwhelming sense of tears of joy, obviously.
Well, for some people.
For some people. But genuinely, it was like, in 1 second, your life's completely changed. And for me, it suddenly felt like a massive responsibility that I was going to step up to the mark to try and meet my best. You know what I mean? It's like, I felt positive about it, felt really emotionally
I don't think you're ever ready.
No, you're not ready. That's another thing.
I wasn't. I thought I was. And I'm going back to the end of the 80s when Callum was born, and I didn't ever...
1880s.
Yeah, it feels like it sometimes. Have you seen me walk across the road? But no, I didn't never feel that I was ready, whatever that meant. And in a very short space of time, I realised I wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't think I felt ready. I think because you've got the pregnancy and you're getting everything ready, aren't you, and you're there, it's really difficult. Suddenly you're like, oh... And I remember, like, my eldest, Isaac being born, and I just used to sit and stare and think. And now he's 17, I just sit and stare at him and think, what is this?
Yeah. Nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed with him, but I'm only joking. But I don't think it ever prepares you, and I think the emotional side of it for both the mum and the dad is huge.
Because I'm an old dad, I mean... The culture I was brought up in, those thoughts were just never there. Emotionally, it was never there. No one ever sat down and said to you as a man, are you ready for this? How are you feeling? No. In the way that I did. When I became a granddad and, in the lead up to, Bella's birth, I was always saying to Callum, are you okay? Are you ready? And it was really, really an awakening for me that 30 odd years later, he was just like me. He was going, yeah, I'm ready. It was very masculine, or whatever that means, and it was very macho, and I'm ready. Right. And I could see within the first 6 months of Bella's being here, he was so not ready. And yet he was so much older than me when he became a dad. He was nearly 30. Right. And I could see he wasn't ready, It's a
sense of responsibility, though, isn't it, I think? And that still weighs heavy on me now. Like, I've got Ivy's coming up 15, Isaac's coming up 18. And that sense of responsibility is huge. And I think if you go back to when they're first born and you talk about being off work, paternity-wise, I don't suppose, looking back in my own experience, I realised that, you just go, you get 2 weeks. That's it. You don't think anything else of it. But on reflection, I don't agree with it. And I think it should be optional. And 2, it should be longer. But
what should be optional?
Whether you want 2 weeks or more.
All right.
So for me as well, it should be over a longer period. So from my experience, I would come in from work, really busy as a police officer. Kids' mum would be, I've been at work all day, I've been at the baby all day, there's a baby, you're saying, I've just done a 12-hour shift, I need to chill myself or just reset. So the Zen battles have come into it as well, but I think that we need to support mothers over a longer period because of the different periods of that child. So it's all well and good. Like, yes. I'm not being funny. The first 2 weeks of Isaac and I had been born, they were asleep.
Yeah.
Which was lovely.
But they're asleep.
Yeah.
Really, aren't they? And then everyone comes round and everyone's...
All right, I'll chuck one at you that's probably not that talked about with dads. Did you do any skin-to-skin contact that they shout about so much with babies?
Probably not.
No. So I was encouraged to when I did.
I did loads, yeah.
Yeah, and it was you did, and I did too. So there's me. There's pictures of me not just in the hospital at home, doing that because they were like, there's all sorts of benefits to it. I couldn't tell you exactly what that is, but the bonding.
Yeah.
If I was to look at the evidence of like me and Charlie's relationship now, he's 17. It's unreal. Do you know what I mean? Like how close we are as well. Yeah. And we talk about this thing, and he's seen those pictures as well. But there's something there.
There is, and I think, but what my point of having it over a longer period of time, and this is what I wanted to firstly discuss with you, is in my eyes, the development of a child, one you miss out on as a father, because if you're at work a lot or you're doing what you think is right.
Yeah.
So to me, I think it should be 4 to 6 weeks, but over a 2-year period.
Right.
So what happens to mum when baby's 1? And financially, do they need to go back to work? Can I help? Well, actually, I can help on these days with childcare, and not childcare because it's your own kid, but you know what I'm saying? Like, and I think it should be longer because of different periods to support the man better.
Right.
I really do.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when I took mine, I took 2 weeks straight. When I look back and I thought exactly the same as you. It's like I could have used that 2 weeks later. I was in the NHS at the time. And I thought, like you said there, Charlie was like, he was asleep a lot of the time. He wasn't kind of with that much interaction. But I got that important space. But when I think later, yeah, I think there's times when it would have really helped his mum a lot more to take some time. And it was actually beyond a year later. And I'm not sure why. And I know you can share the time as well. And I think the conversation generally went, yeah, you're not having any of that. Like, I'm having that, basically. And I got time, obviously, to come back from work. You'd be putting as soon as you're back home, you put all that time in, wouldn't you? But yeah, I'll have a think. I think as we're going, I just can't really, for me, having that flexibility for a year now rather than anything else is obviously a huge bonus. But there is a part of me which sort of feels like this is about rebalancing for dads. But do we need to go even further? How much more important are dads? How important are dads compared to mums with this, basically? Is it an equal thing?
So, go.
Yeah, my journey is prehistoric in comparison. So when Callum was born, you literally, I was in the post office then when he was born, and you just got a bit of special leave, you kind of took 2 or 3 days. And my 2 eldest daughters, they were, we adopted them, me and my partner at the time adopted them, and by then I was a trade union rep, and, I worked, literally you sort of self-employed really in terms of working for the union. So you just took as much time as you needed because it was a trade union and, you're moving into the 90s, early millennium. There was a bit better understanding and awareness of the role of dads, if you like. And now at Northumbrian Water, of course, it's that statutory 2-week provision. So I've been through, for my sins, I've been through different phases of what is seen as good practice or best practice. Some would argue, perhaps, that it hasn't evolved quickly enough, especially as we've begun to have a much better understanding of the role of dads. Yeah. But the problem that we have is because it's a paternal and not maternal, there's almost a cultural understanding that maternal is the be-all and end-all because the woman carries the child and gives birth. Right. And almost for dads, it's almost optional. Yeah. Some dads, as you said earlier, Matt, will opt into that, and some won't. Yeah. Some won't, So as organisations, most of the best organisations have that statutory, and you're right. Do men want it 2 weeks? Do they want it spread out? Do they not want it at all?
Yeah.
We, like many organisations, we sell holidays. People want to go on holiday, we buy it back off of them. We don't collect any data as such, but is there a trend of blokes selling their paternal leave because they don't want it? It's a real complex issue, but the most important thing is that finally, as I said, as an old dad, finally we're having a debate about it. Yeah. And we're talking about it, backed by the research that you said earlier.
There's a kick locally called Close Knit. They did a video recently, like an animation. It's brilliant, about kind of things to expect now you're a new parent. And actually, right, it was pretty much equal for both parents. It's the first time I've ever seen a resource where it's really been like, and dad's role here, rough and tumble play, very important for empathy, blah, blah, and lining all these things up. And then there's an organisation who called Northeast Young Dads and Lads. They created a resource called DigiDad, which is aimed particularly at younger dads, but it's an online resource. Anyone can access it, and it's entirely wrapped around like kind of like dad's role, what things you can expect, difficulties like supporting mum. And then I'd interviewed during the pandemic. I interviewed a guy called Rick. The interview's on our YouTube channel, who supported his wife through postnatal depression. She was very severely ill. She was hospitalised back and forth, and to Leeds, as I understand. So there was a journey to travel as well. And then as she started to recover, and she did make a full recovery, he started to go downhill. So basically, he'd been on that high alert all the time, doing that support, and then he crashed and started to experience depression as well. So you think about the context of this adjustment and change in that context, in the sense of like you can't predict the future and what's going to happen. That flexibility comes in. It's a lifeline, isn't it? It could be a lifeline.
So I was going to come on to postnatal depression. So you do 2 weeks at the beginning.
Right.
Mums are still in a bit of shock about what has just happened to her body and
Literally.
what she's just experienced. You do 2 weeks. Everyone comes round. Babies tend to be quite good at that age, and they just sleep, and then they're back awake, and then you go back to work. 6 months later, mum, postnatal depression, whether they're admitted or not, it's kicking in. That's then where, for me, we should be able to go to our employees and say, right, I have, for example, 3 weeks left of my partner's struggling.
Mm-hmm.
I need to take a week. And then I'm looking at probably then supporting that towards the end of the year.
Right.
I mean, at the time of the birth of my two, I was on shifts. So 2 days, 2 backs, 2 nights. So I always had a bit of time during the day on my backs. My first night shift was almost a day off, but then you're on nights and you're trying to sleep, and then you're 4 days off, you're recovering. And I think it gets forgotten as well around dads. I was in a really stressful job. If you were a dad in the emergency services, and what you're seeing and what you're coming home from seeing, with babies, new babies, you don't get that time to recover yourself as well. So for me, paternity needs to be spread for longer. And obviously, I understand businesses will say, well, we can't do that. We've got people on leave. You can't just... But there has to start to be a better understanding of what that means for bonding with the child. But we need to support the mums. Mm-hmm. And like you say, Mickey, some fellas might say, I'm not about that. I'll have my 2 weeks. That's me back at work. And I'm being honest. If I'm really honest, I used to go back to work sometimes for a break. In the police, I used to think, this is a break.
Yeah.
And nothing against anyone at home. You just, for your own headspace, you're away from it.
You need your own space. And I was absolutely the same, especially working a similar shift system in the Fire Brigade. Sometimes those 4 days off, especially with a young baby, you were like, oh, no. I'm leaving a nice, cosy world, whatever that world was in terms of work. And you were going to have to spend time in a place that sometimes, especially if you're younger, I think, or a first-time parent, you're genuinely not equipped for. Mm. So your safe place, your safe haven is back at work because you know about that.
It's true.
And I think, one of the other difficulties we've faced in the last 30 or 40 years is, of course, the societal shift around what being a parent means. So for men, it's always been about being the breadwinner, the main earner, hence the need to get back to work. That is a deeply embedded, isn't it, in our DNA? Mm-hmm. And in the last 20 years, where that started to change. So not only have we got that evolution, we've got utter confusion in terms of our gender around paternity and maternity and newborn. We're confused. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what you do is role modelling. It's what you learn from your parents and the people around you. And as I said, so my culture, there was never a discussion about how you felt, how you were coping psychologically, what you needed to do for your other half. We never
expected to
culture.
Get on with it.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of, certainly, and I could be wrong here, but in terms of working people and working culture, that is what we do.
Yeah.
We just get on with it. We haven't got time to sit around and talk about it and feelings and the psychological effects, because our DNA is to get on with it. It's just to get on with it, and so that's what's changing.
So from a financial point of view, I remember, even if you, I don't want to talk about maternity today, but I think a lot of mums go back to work probably too early because they're on statutory maternity pay. They think, well, you know, the drop in money's huge, mortgages, you're rebudgeting. It's like, unless you're in a comfortable, bit more of a privileged position, then it's really difficult. And I think the financial aspect always comes back into it. And you're right, as a male, I used to think, oh, there's some overtime at the weekend. So I'd come off my shift pattern. There'd be overtime in the town centre at work. So I'd say, look, I'm working. Well, what do you mean? Well, I've got the baby again. And then them in-house battles begin. So you're, as a man, probably trying to be masculine. You're trying to earn money to bring the food in, put food on the table as such, to use an old term. Because you realise the struggles financially. So can I earn an extra 200 quid a year, £100 there just to help? But you're going to work stressed because of the pressure of, well, hang on, it's a Saturday night. I thought we could have done something together, and the baby's crying, and you know, it's got colic or what, and all of that. And then so then that battle starts, and in your head, you're just trying to do the right thing, and no fault of the mother, they're going, oh, where?
Well, that's
and
that's
where the battle comes.
That's the difficulty. What is the right thing?
Yeah,
you know, and you know, we're talking about paternity today, but for men in general, as I said, what is the right thing nowadays? You know, society, especially because of social media and everything else, is changing at a rate of knots in comparison to where we've been historically. And yet paternity being the real challenge, because you've got another life. You know, you're not falling out or having some tough times between you as a partnership. You've now got something else to, you know, someone else to consider.
It's true.
So you throw that into the mix. It is.
That's huge.
Oh, it's a powder keg. For some people, it's a powder keg. I mean, I don't know about you, Matt, but I certainly know up until about 20 years ago, the worst professions for relationship breakup, stroke divorce was the emergency services. Yeah. You know, was the emergency services. So there you got people who work in those services, who are inherently good people because they're public servants. Yeah, outside of the workplace, they can't hold down a relationship. They can't hold down a marriage. And then, of course, as we just said, you then throw a new human being into that. You know, it's a real struggle. It's a real struggle for both people. But for men, it's a massive struggle because what is our role? In the last 20, 30 years, what is our role? Not only in society, but as dads. Because as you said earlier, Richard, our role is so important in the development of the children. So important.
How many nannies did you have then?
A few. Yeah. We got through a few nannies. Can you believe that?
The privilege, but the range of that in terms of how people cope. So let's say you've got a mum who's actually struggling with bonding. Okay, so you know the unthinkable happens is that actually the mum has a baby, struggles to bond. Suddenly the dad's stepping into that role. And actually, what these new changes allow for is for a father to pick up the main, what would you say, primary carer for that child and actually step in. That happens.
It does happen.
Of course it does. And I know that example I gave before, that's exactly what had to happen. So suddenly, a lot of those, you know, suddenly there's a dad who's been thrust into the role of what's traditionally been thought as a mother, and the extra pressures that suddenly brings as well. There's one scenario where this is absolutely phenomenal in terms of delivering like a solution. Because if you didn't have that, and the mum's struggling to bond, let's assume this one, dad's out at work as well. He's thinking, what's going on? You know, is a baby getting ignored? Is a baby getting changed? Is it cries going unheard? No response and so on. Not even getting the basic kind of serve and return as they call it. But he's at work. And so the pressures are like suddenly split. It's actually, you know, in the eyes of the law now, that can be different. Like you can flip that, and that might be better for the mum. Mum goes, do you know what? I'm gonna get back to work, get on with that, and then you flip it. So you talk about the changing roles of fathers. That's an absolute. There's some dads out there who are experiencing that right now.
100%. We'll take a quick break. This podcast is brought to you by Every Man Can, a non-profit community interest company working on helping everyone find what works for them. Follow us on social media, like and subscribe to help us.
Hello.
So, we're discussing men's roles. So would a man's role be clearer if he had more time at home and able to prepare more time
No.
off?
No.
You don't think?
No, I don't think so. It's not obvious. Mickey said there's no... They used to have this book they'd give you in the NHS, right?
I remember them.
Remember this? Do you remember?
Mate, I remember prenatal classes.
Yeah. It's, oh, gee. I need to think about that. So there's me and one other bloke. That's it, right? And you both look at each other like, what did we do to volunteer for this, right? And it's all about the mum. And you're just sat there like some, half beanbag or something. Right, a total spare part, right? Yeah. Fast forward, and there was even like there was this really thick sort of A4 book that they gave you, probably 100 pages, and you'd be flicking through, trying to find the bit where Dad's mentioned, let alone like what the hell am I supposed to do? And it'll say something like, and Father can make some meals for the mum while she's starving, presumably, losing more weight in the corner, and it's like nothing. And so this is what I mean by these digi-dad resorts. It's like it's very clear. We understand now, like what the role of both parents is. In fact, there's some research like if you've got a daughter. Like an estranged father, an absent father to a daughter is potentially more impactful negatively than a son as well. So all these, like how the importance of a father to a daughter role and all these things we haven't considered before as well. So it's like so we're not even talking about the mum and how she experiences it and how much the father can be there. It's actually, like Mickey said earlier on, exactly what is the nature of being a dad.
So imagine so let's look at, you've prepared, you're in a comfortable relationship, you've organised a pregnancy, and no matter what happens, it's a shock. Imagine now you're 17, 18-year-old, girlfriend falls pregnant, out the blue, you've got 9 months to try and prepare, and no matter how supportive people are around you, I mean, if it happened to our Isaac now, I would probably pack in work and I wouldn't be happy, but you'd move them in and help, and try and help them, but I think... Nicky's not happy with that, yeah.
Of course you would. They're your children.
And you give them as much support. But imagine with your head on the pillow at 17, 18 thinking, oh my God, like... And then if they've just started a job, they're an apprentice or whatever's going on, what's that paternity look like to them? So to them, 2 weeks to them is like... Because it's understanding that role as a young father as well and what paternity leave is and what do you mean I get 2 weeks off and what does that mean? And it's understanding all of that, and I find that fascinating. Is for all it doesn't prepare you fully, the age of that must be terrifying.
So let's just take one then. So when did you ever feed your baby?
Yep.
Did you? As well, you were lactating, were you?
Probably was at the time, wouldn't you? To be honest.
So how did that make you feel? Can you remember that?
So both mine, I was the first to feed.
Right.
In the hospital.
Right.
While Mum was getting, whatever done, and
and
I had. So on both occasions, I sat in James Cook Hospital on my own, like, what is this? With this tiny human, and you're feeding them through a bottle, and it was magical.
It's magical.
And you never forget that.
It's such a simple act.
I loved it. I mean, because it was it's like a new toy. It was new, and if you like, if you grow up and you're in a community where new things excite you, that's what it was for me. And it was so far removed from my, machismo and the whole manly thing. It was great, and I really loved it. And as I say, from the first one to the last one, I've always liked it. I've never had a problem getting up. It was almost like it was a worthy cause.
What are you tapping though when you're doing that? Like if that's like you talk about masculinity and like it was something alternative to that. It felt different. What was it? What did you feel like you were tapping when you were doing it?
Well, I joined it. I just thought it was masculine to be doing it.
To be a responsible dad.
To be a bloke, to be a dad.
Yeah.
So I never separated it, and I never, probably not until Luke, who's now 15, came along. I never ever thought about it, in an emotional sense. It was still that masculine, I'm a bloke, I'm a man, I'm feeding my child, I'm providing for my... It was just another provision.
That's it.
Because that's how we grew, right?
That's it.
So I want to touch on a personal experience I had, and it's not me slating the police or anything, but when I was in the police and me and the mum had separated, and so Ivy was only 4 months old, unfortunately. So it was hard, and my pay was frozen at the time. They were kicking off about pensions. It was everything. No overtime. I was broke. One payday, pay slip lands, almost £600 out of my wages gone. What is this? So I went to HR, not in the right frame of mind, handled it really badly. I was like, you've took £600 out of my wages, what's going on? Like, I went berserk, didn't handle it diplomatically at all. The response I got from the head of HR is, stop you there, we can do what we like and not tell you. So, long story short, over a 2-week period, they paid me my money back. And initially they took it out because I said I owed them that in paternity. I took too much paternity leave.
Right.
When they did the investigation, they actually owed me 2 days. So, and the impact that had on me for them 2 weeks, I had no money anyway. I was really struggling financially. I was struggling emotionally. You know, it was a balance of trying to work full time as a, you know, in a stressful role, have a 4-year-old and a 4-month-old on my own, which, you know, is a consequence of being a dad. I don't take anything for that, but just to take money out. And I wonder in how many roles, or you might be able to answer this, Micky, from a union point of view, when you were, have you ever seen anything like that?
No,
Oh,
never.
it was unbelievable.
And that's the difference. I mean, I'm at Northumbrian Water now, and it's a unionised. You know, it's a unionised. Not many unionised private sector, and it is very heavily unionised. And as a business, it almost has not only a corporate but a moral perspective on making sure that it treats people humanely and with compassion. And I'm really proud of the fact that Northumbrian Water, there's the real understanding that people have difficulties, but they're our people and we value our people and we're going to help them as best as we can. You know, and that wasn't always the case. I mean, you know, there was times in the fire service when there was this mandatory time where if you was off sick, you got full sick pay. And then, and literally, it was a cut-off, and it was at the whim almost of managers, of other human beings. You know, and I remember sitting in difficult arenas saying, but this person's got cancer. You know, you can't stop their pay after 6. This is not someone hurt themselves at a fire or hurt themselves playing football and, you know, they're in a plaster cast. This is life-threatening, really life-threatening, sometimes terminal. What do you mean you're going to put them on half pay after 6 months? You know, it's utterly ridiculous. But I'm really proud of the fact that at Northumbrian Water, and of course, you know, we're in the 21st century, for Christ's sake. I'm really pleased that at Northumbrian Water, you know, there's a real compassion and a real empathy for people's struggles because, you know, as you've described, Matt, as difficult it was, it is life. You know, it happens. It's not storybook stuff. This is true.
To treat people equally, you've got to treat them differently, haven't you?
Listen, you know, in terms of my job, when people talk about, you know, equality, and I say, look, first of all, I'm going to have equity. We'll have equality when we've got equity.
Yep.
Absolutely. If you're a person-centred organisation, you know, you're treating people on merit. The idea that you can treat people all the same is ridiculous.
So this is my point going on to paternity. Do you think that should be an option to have more, or do you think it should be set? So for example, I employ you, and I say to you, right, the statutory paternity is 2 weeks. However, you have the option of a further 3, but you can take that within a 24-month period of that child being born. Because what we recognise is the progress of, as we've discussed on here, like your mother's different angle and stuff, the child's development. Do you think that should be optional, or do you think that should be in place, that there's 5 weeks over this, but it's on you if you take it or not?
Well, I think that, you know, the difficulty for any business is how they have that, whether they've got that flex to do that, you know, because they've also got their business considerations. So that's the biggest challenge. I do think it will evolve. I do think as we get more and more research and studies and a better understanding of paternity and the role of fathers, not only as dads, but in a relationship and in an environment where they've got that responsibility, I think it'll evolve. I think it's got to be. I mean, come on, let's be honest. It wasn't that long ago that maternity wasn't a whole year off with full pay. Sometimes it was 3 months. I remember Callum's mum going back to work after 3 or 4 months, you know, because that's just what you did for whatever reason, mainly financially. But it's evolved, isn't it? You know, most, especially large organisations now, women can quite rightly have a full year off, and most of it is on decent pay, not necessarily always full pay, but decent pay. So I think paternity will evolve like that. However, again, you've got to understand that we still have a society that isn't necessarily on the same page as us. So there'll be plenty of kickback from people who won't want that to happen, because their cultural mindset and their buy-in is very much that it's still a woman's role, and we're bit parts. And I think you'll get a lot of that. I think you'll get a lot of that industry. I think you'll get a lot of that politically, and I think it's a struggle. But I think it will evolve. How quickly it evolves, we don't know. But of course, I think it will. It has to.
Let's take a little snapshot then. So Northumbrian Water. How is that played out there, and is it in the variation that's offered and the flexibility that's now offered?
At the moment, it's statutory 1 block, 2 weeks.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
And can you take that flexibly, or is it just 2 weeks? That's it.
2 weeks. That's it. 1 block. Like most organisations of that size.
So if you're due to become a father now, though, with the changes in legislation, you've been affected by that, though, right? In terms of Northumbrian Water being affected by that, in terms of the policy changes or shifts.
It's really good, because we're unionised, that those things are always being discussed. Hence, the evolution sometimes happens quicker in some places than others. So our trade unions might come to us and ask for certain things on behalf of their members, and ultimately it then impacts on everyone, not only their members, because that's how we roll, quite rightly, as an organisation. But I'm sure that will evolve.
So where I suppose what I'm saying is where maternity leave can be divvied out between both parents, which, by the way, I think includes a step parent as well, a stepfather, if he's deemed to be the main, one of the main carers as well. Yeah, it depends. So if they decided, have you had any employees where they've done that, where they've actually shared some of the maternity leave their way and split that time?
I can't say for certain I am, but my gut feeling is if that was necessary, that, again, with empathy and compassion for that situation, it would certainly be something that would be considered and delivered if they could.
Yeah, I mean, apart from anything else, you'd have to, wouldn't you?
And the challenge, again, always.
It's not a legal duty. I thought it was is it not a legal duty now?
I'm not sure.
But I do know of in other organisations where, from a same-sex perspective, where people have shared the leave. Yeah.
So it might even be more common to do it that way.
I wouldn't call it. I don't think it's common. I think the public sector are always probably ahead of the curve in terms of,
of course.
The people-centred stuff. But we just want everyone to be like that, don't we? And as I say, we notwithstanding the difficulty of, your flexibility in your business and the capacity your business has for that.
I always wondered about, like, just from a practical point of view, if you've got a mother and father, both working full-time, 2 different organisations, they decide between them they're going to split the maternity leave rights, if you like. How on earth does that even work in terms of, like, functionally? So the employer goes, well, okay, you need to see some evidence, I guess, of the mum reducing her leave, so we can trade that here in terms. It'd have to be
complex. It's absolutely complex. But then it's, we're talking about people, right? And humans, we're complex, right? And our circumstances are complex, and our environments are complex. And yes, in an ideal world, you'd like businesses to have that, but it's very, very difficult. And that's why some of these things and the evolution of some of these things take a long, long time.
That's it. And Isaac, when you consider some of the... Okay, so let's talk about, if you don't mind, just an absent father, even an absent mother, and actually what the impact of that long-term on development, on social skills, on emotional intelligence, emotional health, all that kind of stuff. We know that can be a huge burden on society in terms of the numbers. So I wonder what the balance is in terms of allowing this to happen, in terms of like that flexibility, that longer choice. Like you said, Matt, the choosing to take that leave at the key development points. How much of a positive impact that could have on society in 20 years, 30 years, if we just suddenly flipped it?
100%, but from a financial point of view as well. Childcare now is... I work with people who work to pay for childcare. So I look at them and I think,
I get it.
I just don't... Why'd you work then?
Yeah.
But they're coming to work for their own mental well-being and their own mental strength and their own sort of...
Oh, there's a role in good work. Yeah.
So... Yeah. But they're paying £1,200-1,300 a month in childcare. Wow. That's with vouchers and whatever else comes your way. And so when you talk about paternity in particular, when mum is ready to go back to work, and let's be fair, probably wants to go back to work for a break, that's where dads should be able to step in over a longer period, in my eyes, because as well, the financial strains of everything that we've discussed anyway, childcare is so expensive. So expensive. And if you've got 2 in childcare, preschool, big money.
Yeah.
It's proper money. I mean, we've always had the privilege of, me and Anna are both working and earning decent money, but I never forget, because the last 2, Grace and Luke, were selective cesareans, and God, you could pick your time and day, and we picked Luke's on the basis that that's a nice day of the week, and we didn't even think of childcare. And
Wednesday's child.
Yeah, sort of thing, and it didn't dawn on us that we had a week's window, and one meant being the youngest child in the class or the oldest child in the class. And of course we picked him being the oldest child in the class. But of course what that meant was an extra year of childcare.
That's just blowing my mind a bit.
Because if we'd have picked before the 2nd of September, because we could, they give you a week and say, what day of the week do you want the cesarean? And we picked across the line, look at Nick, that is another year of childcare, right?
That's it.
So the cost implication to us was, like Matt just said, the best part of 12 grand. The best part of 12 grand, whereas we could have picked. We could have picked the other side and saved us a lot of money. But people have those choices.
That's a values decision then.
Yeah.
So the older, perhaps better, more developed cognitively to cope with the school, all that stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But as Matt's just described it, people with not a lot of money who have to make that call, that's got to be a consideration for them.
Certainly, it does.
That's an extra year of childcare.
Yeah, it's massive.
So if we go back to being a new dad,
right?
So
can I just, it's almost like parents being mini accountants now and having to make decisions.
100%.
Working families. I've got this application to fill in. I've got child benefit. I've got like the benefit. All these different things that go on at the same time as well. So when you talk about practical things, but one parent might not be any better than the other one at doing that as well. So what supports out there?
I would guess there are couples out there who have put off having children for financial reasons.
Oh, no doubt.
We know that.
And that is...
We do know that.
But when you look at the birth rate of mothers now in terms of how old they are when they have their first child, that is purely financial.
Yeah, that's it.
Plus, apparently, there are not a lot of decent men out there.
Come on, mate.
But no, that's what they tell you. They tell you all the time that we are not having children because we can't afford it.
Yeah, that's right.
We can't afford it.
So, to start to bring this to a conclusion, there's no right or wrong answer, and I suppose it's down to a company, a business, to have that empathy, that relationship with their employees, where they're saying, we understand. So to me, there has to be an understanding. And when we talk about mental strength and when we talk about helping men, which is what paternity, this is the topic, we've discussed it being a new dad. It's stressful. You don't know what the hell's going on. Do I go back to work? Then you go back to work trying to do the right thing. Then you might be getting a bit of grief at home. And then it's like, and you talk about postnatal depression, but men, it can become quite exhausting. And in the end, it gets to the point, relationship breakdown, unfortunately mine did. And you look at it and you're doing shift work, so your days off are taken up with childcare, trying to save the financial aspect of all of that. For men, I think the conversation really needs to be louder in organisations. But coupled with that is to support our women in our lives as well, because we often talk on this podcast around how important them women are in our lives. And when you're having a child with someone, whether it's accidental or not, or whether you're in a meaningful relationship or not, we have to look after that woman as well, because now you're tied to them for the rest of your life. So from a mental strength point of view, it's really important that this message is loud, it's heard, it's constructive. And I think we have to start to look as well as, I think a lot of businesses and companies look within. Let's go and look at other organisations and see what works best for them and have that conversation. So, for example, the public sector, the Fire Brigade, what are private companies doing and how does it benefit them and things like that? And I think it needs to be a wider sort of look at this.
So Mickey made a point earlier on that has been ringing around my head a little bit, which is this. It's kind of like this doesn't happen unless dads exercise their rights to take it. And actually, so before that even happens, they have to understand, like, why would I do it? What would my role be? How is that valued? To think long term. If you're a younger dad, you're less likely to do that. That sound like a terrible thing, but actually, that's a part of your brain that develops as you get into your mid-20s, so I'm told. And so it's like, it's really on men. It's really on dads to exercise their rights, isn't it? Because actually, probably a lot of employers would, like you said, economically, they want your bloody work, So
and absolutely, and as working people, you know, our history is we've never been given anything. Everything we've got today, we've demanded. God, people have died for some of the rights that we've got today.
Like a true trade unionist.
Absolutely, always going to be a trade unionist. But
same.
so, absolutely. But before we go demanding stuff, again, as a trade union official, I used to say, let's know what we're demanding, and why we're demanding it. Because, call me a cynic. The first response is going to be, no, we can't do that. So you've got to make your argument, and you can't make your argument until you've really defined what it is you want and why you want it. So podcasts like this are really important to start to tickle people and start to say, look, what do we really want in society? As men, what do we want? What do we want as fathers? And for me, in terms of a demand or an expression of wanting something better than what we've got now, we have to gauge it first and foremost as wanting to support women.
Who do you think, what dads are going to benefit most from this, do you think, Mickey?
I think every single dad. I think, hand on heart, I think young dads.
Yeah.
I think young dads are going to be...
Why do you say that?
Because you're young.
Yeah.
You're just starting out in life, and like Matt said earlier, sometimes mistakes happen in this space, and you know nothing about life when you're young. I would argue as an old dad, sometimes the maturity of young people, let alone young men, is less than it was, historically and in the past. And so the beneficiaries of a much wider debate and a really, people-centred, thought-centred around how we evolve this space, the main beneficiaries, I would say, are going to be young men. Young men who are utterly confused in so many aspects of our life now, in a way that we were never confused. So those are the biggest beneficiaries. But ultimately, the beneficiary of evolution around paternity and some of the other things we talked about today will be women. Because they will get the support that they desperately need in a really confused and difficult world that we're in.
And I suppose younger men start their career ladder probably on lower pay as well. Like it might well be in the jobs where you might be less likely to get the full benefits as well. So it's a case of pushing it even more in the areas where that's needed, isn't it? And to see the benefits coming out the other end. It's a societal thing, isn't it? The benefits are something which we all benefit from longer term if it works and we get it more, get it right. That's not always an easy sell, is it? No. Because if the benefits aren't there right in front of you, and especially if it doesn't hit your wallet and all this kind of stuff, then it's often overlooked, isn't it? That's a problem. And
sometimes one of the challenges when we talk about stuff like this is, of course, there's the political element to it. Yeah. Anything that is statutory and legislative has to come from the people who we elect to represent us as well. Yeah. So honestly, what's their experience of some of the things we're talking about?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because they've got to make a decision. I mean, some of the things that I've done in the past and the things that you need, in your workplace, in your society, the route has been through the people who've elected you. But you have to give them that experience and that knowledge because they might not necessarily have it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's a debate that's going to rage on, and rage on rightly so, to try and support our men.
Given what we've got now, what would you have done? What do you think you'd do now if you were becoming a new dad next week? Sorry, do you know something I don't? His face dropped there.
I'm done with that. What do you mean? What would I do?
Well, how would you treat it differently?
I don't know, because that's just how,
Hypothetically, I suppose.
It depends, because I'm in a completely different position financially, emotionally. Yeah. I'm more, emotionally intelligent than I was when I was a new father, and I'm financially in a better position, thankfully. And my honest answer, I don't know. Right. What would you do differently?
With the knowledge I've got now, which I think is really what I'm asking, it's like it's easy to look back, isn't it, and do that. It's like what you said earlier on about those different development. So when people ask me about kind of being a dad, I was like, Charlie knows this. I've said it to him before. He became really interesting when he could talk, and we could, and sort of like as a dad, it's like he became a sponge, and and all that. So it was about 3 or 4 really, like when you could start to get into it. So that's even beyond the scope of this. But I think there would have been different stages when I would have taken it at different times. If it was over 2 years, I would have had more considered. I would say have a more considered approach to when you take that time as well. But that again, all the factors needs of the mum, financial situation, all the different things that can change around your own family, your own demands. It is going to be an individual choice, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we'll end it there. Mickey, an absolute pleasure as always.
Thank you very much.
No doubt I'll see you soon socially.
Yeah.
We'll put in the links about Close Knit, the video, DigiDad, great resources, phenomenal award-winning resources that have been provided that are there to cater specifically for the dad in the case of DigiDad as well. So, yeah.
So thanks for listening.
Thank you.